Hello and welcome to the Be Formless Flow Driven CEO and VC podcast, where we are reshaping life, leadership, and business, as well as investing from the inside out. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Hello, glad to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you, Adam. How is life in Dallas, Texas right now? It's Monday, I think you said Monday evening around 6 p.m. How did you have a nice weekend? How's the start of your week going?
Had a lovely weekend. It's Mother's Day or Mom's Day. I don't know what you say down there. Yesterday, did a little celebration with the family, and this is what I would call a marvelous Monday. 9 hours of phone calls, everything gets compressed at the front end of the week. But things are fun. I'm not traveling. I'm home for a couple of days, so that's nice. And it's getting to be up in the high 80s now. I'm not quite sure. I've never figured out the Celsius conversion, but getting to be warm here in Texas at this time of year. So everything is pretty good.
Yeah, you've almost got the summer glow going on. We're moving into winter here. I love that you called it
Yeah.
Marvelous Monday. And yes, we had Mother's Day yesterday. I call it Mum's Day. So not yesterday, on Sunday. I think pretty much everyone in the world had Mother's Day, and it's a
They
beautiful
should, right?
a beautiful day to celebrate, actually. So yeah, it's a very special day. So let's get on into it. I want to really dive into innovation, change, and what you're seeing specifically in healthcare as well. So you're the managing partner, and I'm going to get this. I'm going to let you. Can you say you're the managing partner of drum roll?
Caduceus Capital Partners.
Caduceus Capital Partners, because I nearly said it the other
Got it.
way.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm just going to let you say it. And then once you say it, I'll remember it, because I would have said it the other way that is not the right way. Caduceus Capital Partners as a managing partner. And you work at the intersection of healthcare innovation, capital, and access. Focus on the challenge of moving meaningful technology into systems that are often slow to change. As managing partner at Caduceus Capital Partners, your work centers on identifying founders and companies capable of improving healthcare outcomes, particularly in areas where innovation has historically struggled to reach underserved communities and overlooked patient populations. Your perspective is grounded in a broader tension that exists across healthcare and venture alike, that breakthrough ideas alone are not enough. Real impact depends on whether systems, incentives, and people are capable of supporting change once innovation leaves the lab and enters the real world. And I think that's something I really want to chat with you about, in terms of the supporting change once innovation leaves the lab and enters the real world. Because I've heard there has been quite that at times disconnect, and we will come back to that. Across fundraising, growth strategy, and healthcare focused investment, can you hear the background noise?
I'm not hearing any background noise or echo on my side.
I'm hearing some serious echo noise. I'm just going to check one thing. Yeah, it's a bit going on. So we'll just see if that changes things. Sorry, audience and listeners out there. And I should have said a big kind hello. That's better. I think must have had a few things open. Across fundraising, growth strategy, and healthcare focused investment, your work reflects a belief that capital should not just accelerate technology, it should help remove the friction that prevents meaningful solutions from reaching the people who need them most. And when you booked in for the podcast and I asked you what's one unique insight when it comes to life, business, and investing, you said helping bring the best of innovation to market faster, particularly for underserved segments of healthcare. I'm going to hand it over to you to tell us a bit about your journey.
Well, thank you for the introduction. First of all, it's definitely an A-tier intro. I'll have to steal parts of that maybe for future use myself. But
I'll send it through to you. It's a gift from me to you, Adam. I'm sharing
thank
my
you.
gift of writing people's identity, because I think it's so important, and to celebrate it.
Well, I appreciate it, and well done. So thank you again. Well, my journey to get to this point was largely a health technology consulting career, or entirely, I guess, for that matter. And much like a lot of my partners at Caduceus, we came out of the last 20 or 30 years of health technology transformation. I myself collected some common business cards, Deloitte, Ernst& Young. I worked for a company called Optum, which is a very large health services provider here in the States, a little bit globally as well, but big names in technology transformation. And electronic health records, even paper to electronic, kind of the tail end of that conversion earlier on in my career, front office, back office, kind of you name it. So across, a lot of large global capability firms, like I named, across about 20 years in my case, of just hauling a suitcase around the country from hospital to hospital. Just I've acquired a little bit of a taste for everything in healthcare. And again, my partners in a similar way. I'm actually kind of the junior person around the shop still in many ways. And my mentors actually had been my entry point to venture capital and getting into this world for the last several years and now full time. But basically, spent a couple decades in health tech and learned everything I know from that. And through some key relationships and folks that I really wanted to spend more time with, got involved in Caduceus in around 2020 when that was started. Caduceus Capital Partners is a venture capital firm. So we raise money, we raise funds, we invest those funds, and we try to help those companies grow and produce a successful exit in return for our investors. We have a few other businesses as well under that Caduceus umbrella. One is called Caduceus Launch, which is an accelerator program for very early, like pre-seed companies. We have a company called Caduceus Talent, which is essentially an AI-powered recruiting and sourcing engine, and we use that internally. We also kind of sell that as a service externally. And then we have Caduceus Advisory, which is kind of my full-time responsibility. The managing partner title is just common across everybody, but we all have a role to play or kind of stay in our lane, if you will. And advisory is where I'm mostly focused at this point in time. Advisory is essentially a matchmaker between innovation landscape, so startup companies and emerging technology, and the healthcare provider world. And we help the providers essentially identify and put to use some of these emerging tools that are going to have an impact on their bottom line, cost reduction, revenue growth solutions, but heavily leveraging innovation and AI to do things in a different way than they've been done before. So all that put together is a pretty full plate, and
I was about to
I've got
say,
yeah, I got a hand in everything I just talked about, except talent, not quite so much. But yeah, got here again through riding a consulting career into chapter two, for me essentially at this point, and doing it with some friends and colleagues that I really enjoy. And I think what the last thing I'll say is that we're, I think, a very unique group of investors and that we are all, from a consulting or operating background. So we understand the problems in healthcare really intimately. We understand what works, what doesn't work, what's been tried before, what actually is a novel, effective solution. And so we can place our bets more effectively because we have that background. We can also work with our portfolio companies effectively, not really as a private equity, like take the wheel away from you style and tell you what to do and how to do it, but really more as like a hand on the wheel with you. So our founders, we want them to benefit from our experience, our network, our advice, and that's all predicated on having done this stuff in the market for 10 or 20 or 30 plus years in some cases. And so that we kind of bring that approach to our style as investors as well. It's very different from just kind of a spreadsheet based spray and pray. You write 100 checks and hope that 10 of them do
yeah,
something for you. So
yeah.
that's unique to us as well.
Yeah, it's like I got a number of questions. The first thing that's popping up for me though is intentional. It sounds like everything that you do and your partners is very intentional. It's not, like you said, spray and pray, and there's almost like a conscious piece for me, and I keep talking about this conscious capital piece. How important is intention as such, like intention, being so intentional in terms of what you guys are doing, especially within the healthcare space, underserved, people, also not just from a patient perspective, also from a founder, like it sounds like you even called out matchmaking, you're a matchmaker, everything's done almost with care. And you're within the healthcare, sector, if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, there's certainly a method to the madness, I guess, is a high level way to think about it. But yeah, this is definitely not there's a dichotomy where, investing is risky, right? And you have to, caveat everything like you could lose your money, the returns are not guaranteed. And the way that we've tried to balance that is probably, through very focused intentionality or structured, choices that we make or decisions that we make. And really, it's all about mitigating that risk, right? So yes, we are investing in early stage companies. Many companies that get started fail, they just don't make it. And we want to do what we can to pick good ones, right? And that goes back to understanding the industry, the needs, and the solutions that cross our radar every day. We see a couple hundred deals a month, and just even in cold outreach, let alone through our network or other ways that we get deal flow. So being, really, really thoughtful and choosy in the investments we choose to consider, even let alone make, and then also how we can work with those founders to guide them on the best path. And I guess I would say the intersection with underserved populations, patients in greatest need. That's just almost a really fortunate happenstance in that a lot of the real impact and real need in healthcare, at least in the U.S. We probably don't have time to get into the nationalized healthcare versus commercial model rabbit hole, but um, there is so much potential in rural communities and populations that haven't been reached historically, or solutions for Medicaid, which is basically the government safety net payment program, millions and millions, tens of millions of people, and more, all the time, that can be served through new AI, innovative and means of engaging with those people and getting them into the care continuum. And it's great for all reasons, right? It's certainly great from a patient experience and care perspective. It's good for the system. And, last but not least, can be good financially too for investors. So I think we consider our deal choices and where we choose to direct our attention and our capital across all those different factors. And again, I think that the getting folks that need the care that they're getting, or the kind of the technology innovation the most, are finally starting to get it. And it's just a really cool point in time that we can be at that intersection of emerging tech, greatest need, where are the dollars coming in, where are the dollars going out, and just find a way to thread that needle and do it really successfully for ourselves and our investors too.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because you talk around, bringing the best of innovation to the market faster. And then you're tapping into these rural, you've then called out the rural communities and the rural piece. Like, how do you make that faster given that generally rural, communities, it isn't as fast to get the attention to them, and hence why they're underserved. What do you do? Like, what are you seeing, or what's being done differently to ensure to make it faster? Because innovation as such, it is moving at such a pace right now. I mean, you talk around emerging tech. Mm.
Yeah, well, I would answer that specifically one way as Caduceus Advisory. So that's the matchmaking business or function that I talked about earlier. Our role is to get in front of a healthcare provider, so usually a hospital or a health system, or it could even be a rural provider. We have a concept called FQHCs, federally qualified health centers in the U.S. here, which are usually more rural focused or rurally located, not wealthy, not able to go out and acquire all kinds of new technology on their own and write big checks. It really just they kind of exist to be an option for everybody or for those that need it. And we interface with all of those types of providers. And our job, again, in the middle there, is to be able to say, look, we know it's overwhelming. And you go to a big conference, you see 5,000 booths, they all kind of look the same. You get all the same spam emails that we do, they all kind of sound the same. And a lot of organizations in that situation will just freeze. I'll kind of do nothing, right? I don't know what to do or which direction to go in, so I'm just going to stand still and hope that things get better. But they will not get better, right? And that's another macro conversation about just the economics and the sheer math of the U.S. healthcare system, at least, and heading toward a cliff that there is no off ramp for, at least at this point in time. But to your question, B, we want to be able to work with providers and say, look, here is a short list, right? There's a shortcut to a few things that we think are going to be really effective,
Mm.
and that will, again, have an impact on cost reduction, impact on revenue enhancement,
Mm.
impact on patient service and how many patients you can serve and where you can serve those patients. And we can very quickly get you to a point of understanding, yes, I see how I could use this virtual registration tool, for example, to continue to operate clinics all around, a 3-county area where we just can't hire people to sit at those desks all day. Or we can use this remote primary care in a box solution to have people actually get a physical at home wherever they live within, with 45 minutes at the kitchen table. They haven't seen a doctor in 5 years. Now they're back into a care pathway, and they probably need some follow up, and they might need a prescription or two. And that wouldn't have happened if not for the stuff that we can help to bring to the table and put to work. So a lot of it is just like getting the users of this technology, the providers, to move, right, to do something. Say, here's a thing, that thing's valuable, we're going to implement it. And it sounds simple to say, but that process it doesn't happen fast or cleanly almost anywhere. And so that's one role that we can play, is to again accelerate, just take the friction and lead time
Yeah.
out of that process. And with our individual portcos too, we can help them. Hey, you've got a great idea, the virtual primary care solution I talked about. Can we help to get you in front of a whole bunch of employers or a
Mm.
whole bunch of payers who are big customers of that, or individual providers that want to use it, as their own white label solution within their region? Yes to all of the above. So we try to do what we can to, again, reduce friction, reduce lead time, and just put the stuff to work, because innovation in a lab is not going to have the impact that we need it to have in many ways here.
Do you find it's a really interesting conversation, and again, a few questions have popped up for me. Do you find that many of the founders that you're partnering with or you're dealing with as such, do they come from a research background and then they don't understand's the wrong word. Like there's almost like lab and then there's commercialization and there's a reality of the real world, right? I've got a couple of questions. One is clearly a friction around that. I hear that a bit in Australia, like there's just this gap, if you like, between quite often the idea, what's being coded in the lab or in the innovation hub, and then bringing it to life as such. And then the other question I have is, it's such an intimate space with regards to healthcare, because at the end of the day, the front line is the patient, and generally, there's the patient is what that's what you're aiming to serve and make their lives better, etc. How many of the founders that you work with have had like a lived experience that has then warranted them developing an emerging tech piece or something that is, going to change or transcend, the healthcare space as well?
Well, I love the question, but the answer is that it's so different.
Yeah,
We work with founders, I mean, from kind of any imaginable background or combination of skills or experience, which is frankly a fun part of the job too, is that we just get to meet and get to know and work with so many different people. Um, with I'd say our large funds, so Caduceus Capital Partners Fund 1 and Fund 2 currently, which is about to close. um, we typically invest in seed stage companies. And for us, that means you are in the market. We would love to see about $1 million in annual recurring revenue. Not always the case, but at least you've got a number of clients under your belt, you got some revenue traction, and you're ready to grow. And that's a great entry point for us, because we want most of our capital to go toward growth, right? Not really tinkering with an idea or an experiment back in the laboratory, but kind of pouring rocket fuel on the pad, if you will, to get these companies, not just to the next level, but way over the next level. And the founders at that point have usually kind of figured it out, right? Regardless of what their background is, they have understand, how do I sell this thing? How do I champion the vision and the roadmap for this? How do I run payroll? Right? There's a lot that goes into the life of a founder, and at that point, they've largely got their arms around it, I would say. I've kind of given you that first blush answer, because we have our launch program as well, which I mentioned a little earlier,
yeah,
pre-seed accelerator. That's like a little garden patch where we will write much smaller checks to much earlier companies, and that's a place where we will definitely see like a physician who's got a great idea but doesn't know a thing about business,
Yeah.
right? Or a technologist like, hey, I saw my dad struggling with this health challenge or disease, and I don't know anything about healthcare, but I wrote this app, and I think it's pretty cool. Like, so we see a lot more variation, perhaps, or maybe the founders themselves are, in one particular niche in their founder journey, and we were going to help them broaden that
Mm.
experience through the launch program, which is a lot. I mean, it's highly mentor driven. It's highly specific to the founder, but there is an element of like legal 101, cap table 101, marketing 101, MVP 101, like everything you need to know. It's like, found startup founder for dummies, the accelerator program version. Um, so anyway, we see all the different types of backgrounds. It's part of what makes this work unique and exciting. We just see so much cool innovation, maybe from folks that you wouldn't expect it from, in some cases even, which is awesome. And as far as lived experience, I think every founder that we work with is definitely very passionate
Mm.
about what they're doing. And we would say we invest in great ideas led by great people. And
Yeah.
so we've put a lot of emphasis on a founder and the founding team. We don't like to invest in anyone we haven't had dinner with. It's kind of a little unwritten rule, but we consider the founder a lot, and it's not just about their resume or book smarts in a certain area. It's really more of a holistic picture. Some of them certainly do have a lived experience, like family member who struggled with substance abuse or lived with a disability or had a particular health condition, or couldn't get pregnant. I mean, there are all kinds of cases like that where,
Mm.
if not the founder themselves, they're very close to someone or have worked in that field, and feel an affinity to that work. It's hard to get really like emotional, excited about revenue cycle and labor automation, but I'd say all the founders in their own way, in an appropriate way, have a real personal passion for what they're doing. We have to see that, certainly, if we're going to invest with them.
Yeah, you just pulled something out, and I was thinking about it. It's so funny how, the formless conversation happens, and as you're talking, I'm thinking about something, and then you actually talk about it. It's like this ESP piece that we have going on here. You mentioned emotional, and you are working in a space that is high, can be highly emotional, and then there's obviously the commercial side of things, the business side of things. How do you and your partners know when to be deep, but be like where your heart, like heart on sleeve, more emotional, and then when to be more commercial, more practical, because you must encounter at times, and it kind of comes back to the founders, when it's like they think that they've got this idea and they're so passionate about it, and they think it's going to go gangbusters, and you can already see all these potential holes in it, and it needs a pivot or it needs a reshape, and the founder is stuck on, no, we've got to do it this way. And again, because we're playing in the healthcare space, how
Yeah,
do you handle those situations? Yeah.
well, I think I'm smiling to myself because our senior partner, or one of the co-founders of Caduceus, I think is really masterful at relationships and human engagement and human dynamic, and I have learned and still have a lot to learn from him about how to do it as well as he does. But we do run into those kind of difficult situations where you've got to steer something in a totally different direction, or maybe rotate an executive team, or replace the CEO. I mean, these things do happen. Um, and just putting the human first, I think,
Yeah.
in that kind of context is always, I've seen the best outcomes come from that type of approach. And some of it even, you can read books on negotiation, and empathy is really important. And put yourself in their shoes, and what do they want? What's a win for you in this? Don't have to listen to me. Like, what are you trying to get out of the situation? Or, I mean, what would you consider to be a good outcome? Just letting people share what's important to them, and sometimes even just get things off their chest, I think, is a great leveler or equalizer. I mean, certainly part of our role is to be, adults in the room, so to speak, and that's not an age thing necessarily, but just, someone might need to say, hey, the math's not adding up here, or this projection is not based in reality, or we need to redo the numbers. Or, hey, we don't think that you're the right person to lead this company. Maybe you'd be better as a chief growth officer,
Mm,
Mr. CEO. You're so passionate, you're great at talking about the product, but you're not the right person to build this team and lead this to the next round. So maybe there's a change to be had there. So obviously, infinite number of ways that you can handle a situation like that or any difficult situation. But I certainly think, human first, people first. That is the mindset that we take. And if the facts are all true and you're speaking the truth, you can't really go wrong there. But I think there's a lot you can do to help yourself and to help other people too, if you kind of put that emotional, personal aspect at the forefront of almost any interaction, but certainly a difficult or challenging one.
yeah, I love that you put human first in the, emerging technology and obviously a lot of automation, a lot of AI. I just think you can't underestimate human intelligence and the human piece. And I just think we need more and more of that in this fast paced world we're in, and the ability to pause to be able to assess things like you're talking about. You might find this a bit of a random question. Where did the name Caduceus Partner, yeah, where did that come from?
Well, I might get in a little trouble. They haven't socialized this too widely yet, but so the Caduceus is the staff of Hermes, like the Roman messenger god, I believe, or maybe Mercury was the Greek version. I haven't had that backwards, but um, so it's a staff with two snakes, a winged staff with two snakes around it, and it can be seen as a symbol of medicine. Um, Actually, the true international symbol of medicine is the staff of Asclepius, I believe, which is just a rod with one snake. So that is like what the American Medical Association uses, I believe. But they're kind of interchangeable. I know that I think the U.S. Army initially started using the caduceus as a medical symbol, and I think Caduceus Capital Partners just sounds a lot better than Asclepius Capital Partners. So we're going to stick with this at this point, but meant to be the symbol of medicine. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I've got a couple of final questions for you. What are you seeing? You talked earlier around staring at a cliff or falling off a cliff or like a really important time in healthcare. Like, what are you seeing as the biggest opportunities right now and the biggest challenges as well?
Well, I mean, biggest challenges at the macro level. Like I'll say this from a U.S. perspective at least, but we're spending more than we can afford on healthcare, and we have more people who are aging into government providers, so Medicare and Medicaid. With Medicare being our senior insurance option, basically the payer for folks over a certain age in the U.S. Um, there are millions of baby boomers flooding into that population, and they're all going to need health care. Most of them want to get their hips and knees replaced. I mean, if you look at the charts of annual expenditure increasing, we can't afford it. It's been unaffordable for a long time, but it's only going in that direction. And eventually, there will be some form of the system collapsing under its own weight, or if certainly, hopefully not. But if there's a major global conflict and defense spending, starts to take priority, then that money will only be able to come from healthcare. I mean, there are not that many big buckets in the U.S. federal budget that dollars can move around at that level, at the trillions of dollars level. Healthcare has been teetering for a long time here, just economically. It's only going to get worse if nothing changes. But I think the opportunity in there, and certainly for us, and as technology investors, we think technology really is the only answer. It's the only way to start to turn the tide there, where we have a tremendous labor cost. Labor is usually the largest line item on any healthcare provider or hospital budget, and the potential of AI to help reduce that need for just manual labor. A lot of redundant processes, fingers on keyboards, things like that. That has to be an area where if we're going to start to move that cost curve in the other direction, it's going to come from labor, and AI is going to be really the long pole in the tent that can have an impact there. And then just other keeping people healthier and away from expensive treatments. Hospital and home, just better quality of life. And I mean, we don't really get into pharmaceuticals much at all, really. Molecules, biotech, just not our backgrounds and not where we play. Um, but there's also potential there as well, through innovation and AI also helping with innovation in those spaces to just make people healthier longer and need less really expensive care for, a more portion of their larger portion of their lives. So there's a huge potential here with this really kind of catastrophic, what the future
situation.
looks like if nothing changes. But then we also have these really unprecedented marvelous opportunities through tech and AI largely, to actually come at this problem in a way we never have been able to before, and really meaningfully impact what it costs to deliver healthcare and what good care looks like and what good quality of life looks like. So it's going to be a fun next decade or so, one way or the other. But we're going to be optimists in
Yeah, I was
that
about to say, I love
sense.
it. I feel like you are such an optimist. You've got this constant smile. Like it's not toxic positivity. It's certainly just glass. Like it's just the ability to keep bouncing forward. Marvelous. You've used the word marvelous a couple of times. This is my final question to you. And you talked around at the beginning of the show about Marvelous Monday, and you said Marvelous Monday, and yet you said you'd had a back-to-back day of meetings. By the sounds of things, you have a lot going on. You travel a lot. You're obviously juggling being a partner, family. You matchmake. You're an advisor. You work with all the different founders. You're looking. You hone in on healthcare and innovation and tech, etc. I've always, I don't know how many years it's been now. I was advised to to start your week off just full of meetings and having back to back to back. It doesn't set you up for success very well in terms of for the week, because you're almost starting your week exhausted, and then by the end of the week, so it's kind of mastering your Monday and easing your way into Monday. I'd love your thoughts on that. And then lastly, how do you ensure that you enable yourself to get into flow state? And what I mean by that is where you have the ability to focus, get the fresh perspectives, feel and perform at your best. What do you do to ensure that in this, obviously in the environment you're in? Yeah, how do you create that space for
Yeah. Well, I'll answer those in reverse. Certainly health is really important to me, and I think that's probably the central pillar of just my routine, or the flow state, or whatever you want to call it. But I typically, if I'm home, or even if I'm traveling, but certainly if I'm home, you'll be in the gym every morning, and it's actually something I've gotten. I've dragged my wife with me in the last couple of years, and now she's doing the weights with me, and it's actually kind of fun. It's been a fun development in our life together, and a way for us to spend a little bit more time as well. But so I guess it's grounding in that sense too. I can start every day, get a workout in, have just a little time, with her. We talk about things, get the kid out the door, and if I start the day that way, whether I have one meeting or 15 meetings, I'm going to feel much better throughout and at the end than if I, felt lazy and skipped the gym, or just had a pancakes and what a cake for breakfast instead of something healthy. Like, I think I can't really articulate it. I haven't really thought this through enough. I think working in healthcare, just kind of walking the walk and trying to be a healthy person and take care of myself and my family, I think that's important as well. And again, I'm not quite sure how to translate that, but I know it's there. And then I think, the Marvelous Monday is a little tongue in cheek, obviously. Yeah, things just tend, everyone is ready to go on Monday, and there's always a lot of calls and meetings and a lot to do. And we have weekly kickoff calls and things, and weekly PMOs and syncs. And they are, long days, but satisfying. And if I would call it miserable Monday if I felt miserable. So maybe I'm, kind of self-revealing my sarcasm there with Marvelous Monday. But yeah, it's just a really busy time. Every week is busy, and I think if I step back, I wouldn't want to have it any other way. I can take a breath, or try not to try to take some days off of my gin and tonics or whatnot. So Monday is usually a good day to to do that as well. But I can put my feet up or whatever, take a deep breath at the end of a Monday and feel like, okay, that was great. I got through a whole lot of stuff today that I need to get through. The rest of the week maybe is downhill. I think that's another way to think about it, is like, yes, front loading makes for a busy day, but it also kind of gives me a sense of accomplishment, and then got through the hard part, I can make it through Tuesday and Wednesday and so on. So I don't know, it works for me, but yeah, I
That's
mean,
interesting. No, I like it.
Mondays are pretty busy around here.
Yeah. No, I like the front loading and the way you've said it. Like it makes it downhill from here. So that's exciting. It's a good way to think about it. And thank you so much for your time. How do we find out more about Caduceus Capital Partners, and how do we find out more about you?
Our website is certainly the best single source of information. It's caduceus.vc, Caduceus dot VC. So actually, all of our companies that I talked about are listed there. There's at least a little bit of information on each, but yeah, otherwise we're pretty active on LinkedIn, myself included. I'm sure you've got my name, attached to the pod here. But we try to keep up pretty well with what's happening in our portfolio, with our launch companies, just things out in the market, conferences we're going to. So LinkedIn is probably a really good source to follow us, corporately, and folks are welcome to follow me as well out there.
Yeah, amazing listeners. And then I guess one final passing, I guess, thought that you might have when it comes to, you talked a little bit about AI before, and obviously AI is playing a big piece in everything we're doing. For anyone, the listeners out there who is a little bit like, I guess, not resistant, they're just not necessarily engaging in as much AI as they could be and playing from an innovation sense, what would be one piece of advice you would give them just to get into it?
I mean, I think just you got to try it. Yeah, I don't know that I've met or talked with anyone who has said, I built the agent or I did the research and I'm more uncomfortable now than I was before. I'm not going to touch this stuff again. I think it's quite the opposite, where once you actually see the impact, I mean, even as a very quick example, we have an exercise we do through Caduceus Advisory where if we're going to talk to a new client, we'll run a value projection for them. We'll be able to say before we ever even meet with you, we were going to pull public information, bed count, net patient revenue, number of hospitals, whatever, just the basics. And we're going to take our top 15 solutions in our vendor network, and we're going to estimate what we think they might be able to do for you from a value creation standpoint. That takes a long time manually. It takes
Yeah,
about 5 seconds with AI.
yeah, no,
I mean,
it's
I've just
wild.
been, even recently, I've been blown away with how effectively we can take a task like that and make it fast, blazing fast, and really accurate, and it looks great. And that's just one limited, consulting business development use case. I think, just a comment on, AI in healthcare and folks being hesitant about like, I don't want the robot to be, reading my chart or cutting me open, or I think it's going to take time for,
100%.
folks to accept that. But if you think about, the end point there, like it's going to be a great world when like the Tesla robot can do knee surgery for 50 cents on anybody in, in their kitchen, perhaps one day.
My
But
gosh.
to the again, the labor cost implication, the access to care, if someone living on a farm can have, the best brain surgeon, the best heart surgeon, the best cardiologist, whatever, sitting at their kitchen table, running on, a little bit of electricity at marginal cost, that's going to be a great world of healthcare.
Mm,
And the only way we're going to get there is to try this a little bit at a time, and there might be, two steps forward, one step back.
yeah,
But I think, largely the goal of the industry, at least as we see it, and we participate in it, is that this is a function for good, and it's going to be great when we start to really achieve some of the impact and value that's promised through these tools and AI specifically. And new things are scary, and that's to be expected. But I think like if we are able to actually try a little bit at a time, see the outcome, try a little bit more, whatever the use case is, whatever the context is, I really believe that folks will not be able to go back.
no,
It's like
I
going
agree.
back to a buggy once you've driven a car. So I'm again going to remain optimistic that that's the path we're going down. But I mean, I really think that just being kind of afraid of this AI thing without actually getting your hands on it and trying it, even in a very exploratory sense, folks have to get past that, right? I think they'll be really pleased if they try to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes back to being like in a lab. Think about it like a lab, just experimenting. It's all about experimentation, right? Like, I'm experimenting a lot myself at the moment, and I'm surprising myself by the day on the daily just with what I'm capable of doing. And I think that the more we get into that is exciting. Thank you so much, Adam, for coming on the show. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. It's been super insightful, super educational. Wishing you all the best, and thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks, B. Be well down there.
Thank you. You too.
Cheers.